That's the last of the trim on the box. So now I'm gonna slide it back against the wall, center it, get it plumbed up and screw it to the wall. The box fits about an 1/8 inch in from the sheetrock on either side. And I'm gonna go ahead and get the top mounted first, and then I'll plumb it up and screw the bottom in place. So we're pretty well plumbed, and the good news is I'm following the sheetrock pretty well. Eventually there's gonna be some wood paneling on this, so I've got a little bit of wiggle room. I'm feeling pretty good about this. I'm just gonna bounce the bottom back this way and put a screw down low. I think that's plenty of screws in this box for right now, because there's a possibility I might have to adjust it just a little bit more once I get the bed frame in here. But now I'm ready to bring that bed frame in, and I'm going to use some clamps and some blocks of wood to hold it up until I can run the screws through from the outside into the bracket that mounts right there. Well, I've wrestled around and got the first screw started on each side. Now all I can do is ease off on this clamp a little bit, let it settle back in, and start to fit the other screws in. So once you get the first two in there, everything else pretty well falls in place. It's just getting those first two in that's a real battle. This side attached, now I'm ready to move over to the other side. All right. Okay, so it's bolted in now. The next thing I want to do is just do a test run, lift it up, and hopefully then I'll be ready to actually put my pistons on. Well, we look like we're in pretty good shape. The next thing I'm going to need to do is put the pistons on and see what they do. So I'm going to let it back down, and then we'll get the pistons. Working by yourself, it takes a bunch of fighting back and forth. I just used a clamp and a board to hold the bed up in the right position to where I could get this cylinder on here. Now, when I take this clamp loose and I push the bed down, this pivot, this is going to shrink, and I'll be able to get the band off of there. One side. Make sure that these little screws are tight. All right. Now it's always going to go beyond where you want it to the first time. So this is the first chance I'll be able to see how the frame fits in the opening. There's two things I need to do from here. I want to plumb the bottom of the cabinet out away from the wall and use a metal L bracket to hold it in place. And then I want to come back and see what the reveals look like on the side of the cabinet. At that point, if If you remember earlier on, I said I didn't want to put all the screws in to hold this panel in place because I may need to actually back those screws off and shift this panel a little bit to get it to line up. We're not in just terrible shape, but I've definitely got to plumb things up and then do some shifting around to make sure everything fits. At that point, I'll have a few more steps, fit a stop, make a header trim, and I don't want to forget to put those brackets in up on the top, plus some more screws in the plywood. But the next thing I need to do is go ahead and lower the bed back down, put the metal straps on the cylinders so I can get them off, and that's going to give me a lot more freedom to make all those adjustments that I need to make to this bed. Now that I'm ready to make my final adjustments, I've got to get these sides held in place. Otherwise, with them moving around, I'll never know exactly where the bed's going to end up. What I'm doing is putting a metal L bracket like this against the side, and I'm putting it right where the baseboard of the cabinet that sits here will cover it, so it'll never be seen. And then I'm going to use these little anchors to hold it in place in the slab. Now, if I was on a crawl space, I wouldn't have to use the anchor. But I'm just going to use two of these little metal L brackets, one on each side, to hold the outside edge in place. Now that I've got both sides in place, I'm pretty sure I'm going to need to make a slight adjustment on the platform. The back panel needs to come this way a little bit on the top, so I'm going to hold it in place with some clamps, back the screws out, pull the panel that way a little bit, then just reset the screws. I clamped these three corners. Now, I didn't clamp the back corner because that's the pivot point. These clamps are not real tight, just tight enough to hold it. I've let out all the screws except the screws in that corner. Now I'm just going to give this a slight adjustment, and I'll just put a screw back in another hole that hadn't had a screw in it yet. So, okay, that looks good. I'm just going to go ahead and put some screws in here. I'm going to work my way around the perimeter of the bed, redoing these screws, and then I'll be able to take the clamps off. I'm going to raise it up and see how it fits. Because the pistons keep constant pressure on the bed, you have to have stops, or else the bed frame would come on in past lining up with this outside. So I've just cut some pieces of poplar that are going to make a solid stop to keep the frame exactly in the straight up and down position is really what I'm looking for. Okay, I'm going to check the alignment one more time to make sure that the platform is right where I want it, and then we'll be ready to put the two pistons back on. So the reveals are just the way I want them to be now. I need to go back, put the two pistons on, and from this point on, the pistons are going to keep this held up in this place. Then the only other thing that I need to do is put a header piece across the top, add a little base piece across the bottom, and then there'll be one more thing I want to talk about that's the final preparation for putting the mattress in. You want to make sure that you put these little keeping screws on here. So I've got both the cylinders on now. I'm going to take this clamp off and lower it down, pull the spring off, and the platform should just come up and suck right up against those stops that I put in there. All right, that is perfect. We'll go cut the piece for the header and for the base. So I've test fit this piece to make sure it had some clearance when it came down. Now I'm cheating it up just a tiny bit because I want to have the least gap here that I possibly can. I'm just going to nail it in place with one nail. I'm going to go check the other end. I'll do one more test fit and then we should be able to nail it off. Looks like that's going to work, and that's as tight as I dare get it. So I'm going to put about 3 or 4 more nails in from each end, and I'll be ready to move up here and put the header piece in. Okay, that's the last piece of trim that goes on the outside of this wall bed. From the outside, it's totally done. But there's one more thing we need to do on the inside so that the mattress is going to have something to sit on, and that's put some 1/4 inch plywood in. But we're only going to talk about it because if I actually put the 1/4 inch plywood in, I wouldn't be able to add a couple of handles I need to pull this down. Right now, I've barely got room to get my fingers in here. Matter of fact, I hope I have room to get my fingers in here to pull this down so we can talk about it. I need to add one strip of wood right here that goes between the 2 legs, and that's to support the plywood on this end, and then we'll just take 2 rippings of 1/4 inch plywood and using some screws, lay them in here on top of these ribs, and that's what's actually going to support the mattress. But I don't want to do that yet because if I have that in place, I couldn't get my hardware on for my pulls. I'm going to use a couple pretty good size pulls on the front of this so the person doesn't have to struggle to get the bed down. Now, right now, this bed's still trying to come up, but once you add the weight of a mattress and bedding, it should stay down pretty easily. If for some reason that didn't work out, I'd have to swap out for the next weaker or less strong set of pistons. But I think this is going to work out just right.